I had a gut feeling my wife was preparing to leave me, so I quietly moved all my assets out of reach. 2 weeks later, she filed for divorce, only to panic when her own plan crumbled. Hello everyone, before we jump into today's story, I need a small favor. Our channel's growth has slowed down lately, and subscribing is the best way you can help. It's fast, completely free, and it helps us keep bringing you powerful, real-life stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Let's keep this community growing together. Thank you, and now let's dive into the video. My wife, let's just call her M, and I had been together 6 years, married for 4. I honestly believed we had it figured out. We were that couple everyone assumed would make it. Inside jokes, shared routines, the kind of rhythm that made life feel simple. She'd surprise me with little date nights. I'd show up with her favorite takeout after a long day. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, which is why the way everything started to unravel still doesn't feel real sometimes. It started small, maybe 6 months ago. Subtle things, the kind of stuff you might ignore if you weren't paying attention. She started taking her phone everywhere, even for short trips to the kitchen or the laundry room. Before, she'd just leave it on the coffee table without a thought. I made a joke once, something dumb like, "What are you, running a secret spy ring now?" She laughed and brushed it off. Said work had been sending her a lot of emails lately. I didn't think much of it until she suddenly put a password on her phone. She'd never had one before. When I asked why, she said something vague about hackers and privacy. Logical enough, but it felt off. Then came the calls. She'd step outside or into the bedroom to answer them, always saying it was just a friend from work. It wasn't subtle. Her phone would ring and she'd vanish. When she started keeping it face down on the table, that's when the pit in my stomach began to form. I'd reach over for something and she'd snatch it up too quickly, like muscle memory. And the distance, it wasn't just about the phone anymore. She started to drift emotionally too. Our conversations became clipped, mechanical. If I mentioned planning something, our anniversary, a trip, buying a new car, she'd just say, "Yeah, we'll see," and change the subject. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, until one Wednesday afternoon she said she was grabbing coffee with a friend after work. Totally normal, but by chance, I was running errands nearby and thought I'd surprise her. When I pulled up near the cafe, she wasn't inside. She was pacing outside, phone to her ear. Didn't mean to listen in, but I caught fragments. Words like, "It's almost ready," and "starting fresh soon." My stomach dropped. It didn't sound like she was talking about work or even a fight with a friend. It sounded like a plan. When she got home, I asked how her coffee date went, trying to keep my voice light. She gave me this full story about her friend complaining about her boyfriend. I nodded, pretending to buy it, but it didn't sit right. Then, out of nowhere, she said something about how we should put all our important stuff together, passwords, accounts, documents, the works, just in case. I remember just staring at her. We'd never talked about anything like that before. When I asked why, she said it was smart to be prepared, like if something ever happened to one of us. Logical again, but too convenient, too rehearsed, like she'd practiced the line. I told her it made sense, but inside alarm bells were screaming. Why now? Why was she suddenly so interested in merging our finances when we'd always kept things easy and separate? I spent that night lying awake, replaying every word, every look, every just in case. A few days later, she brought it up again, this time while scrolling through her phone as I was making a sandwich. "Have you thought more about organizing the bank stuff?" she asked, casual but too precise. I set down the knife and turned to her. "Okay, what's going on?" I asked. "You've been talking about this a lot lately. Is there something we need to discuss?" She looked up, startled, like she didn't expect me to question it. "No, nothing's wrong," she said too quickly, forcing a small laugh. "I just think it's important." When I pressed again, she shrugged, said something vague about emergencies, life stuff. It didn't sound like life stuff. It sounded like she was trying not to trip over her words. I let it go out loud, but inside I knew something wasn't right. The next day, while she was at work, I finally checked our joint account. I wasn't snooping for secrets. I just needed to quiet the noise in my head. But instead, I found a pattern of small withdrawals. Not huge amounts, but consistent. Money that wasn't marked for bills, groceries, or anything I could trace. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding. If she was moving money, why? I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to be sure before I made things worse. I called a friend from college who's a lawyer. I tried to explain everything without sounding paranoid. He listened quietly, then said, "You're not crazy for wanting to protect yourself. If you're worried, now's the time to make sure your assets are safe." It felt wrong, like I was preparing for war against the person I loved most. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, after she went out, I sat at my desk with my laptop open, hands shaking. I combed through our bank accounts, the property deed, every shared document. Each click felt like betrayal, but I told myself it wasn't about hurting her, it was about surviving whatever was coming. I made a list of what I could move quietly, how to secure things without drawing suspicion. By the time I was done, I felt hollow, like something sacred had already died between us. I called my mum afterward. I didn't give her details, just said I needed her to hold on to a few things for me, for a while. She was quiet for a long moment, like she was trying to understand everything I wasn't saying. "Are you okay?" she finally asked. I lied and said, "Yeah, it's just a precaution, nothing to worry about." She didn't press, but there was a pause before she said, "Of course, sweetheart, whatever you need." I hung up with this strange mix of guilt and relief. I hated dragging her into whatever this was, but knowing someone had my back gave me a sense of steadiness I hadn't felt in weeks. By the time Em got home, I had already done it. I moved most of my assets, cash, investments, even the deed to the house, into my mother's name. I left just enough in our joint account to keep everything looking normal, but the rest was locked down. She didn't notice. She came in, kissed my cheek, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I smiled and said sure, pretending everything was fine, but inside I felt hollow. I hated myself a little for what I'd done, but another part of me, one I barely recognized, felt oddly calm, like I'd finally taken control of something that had been slipping through my fingers. The next few days were an exercise in restraint. I kept things as normal as possible, followed our usual routines, didn't ask questions, didn't act suspicious. She seemed lighter somehow, even cheerful. That should have put me at ease, but instead it just made my stomach twist tighter. If she really was planning something, she was doing a damn good job of hiding it. The strangest part was that she never mentioned the finances again, not once. It was like that entire conversation had vanished from her memory. At first I thought maybe I'd overreacted and she'd dropped the topic because it wasn't that deep, but the longer I watched her, the more I realized it wasn't forgetfulness, it was avoidance. Like she'd tested the water, found it too cold, and decided to back off until the time was right. Every now and then I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, her eyes scanning my face as if she was trying to read what I was thinking. The second I noticed, she'd look away, pretending to scroll through her phone or focus on the TV. It was subtle, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The silence between us grew louder. It wasn't like her to drop something she cared about. If she wasn't bringing it up again, it was because she didn't want to tip her hand. And if she was waiting for something, I wasn't about to give her the green light. So I stayed patient. I kept smiling, kept my tone soft, my reactions neutral. But every night before bed, I'd double-check everything, making sure every transfer was airtight, every paper accounted for. I wasn't just protecting money anymore. I was protecting the version of my life that still felt real. By the end of 2 weeks, everything was officially done. The house, the savings, the investments, everything was in my mother's name, neatly tucked away in a trust that no one could contest. It was all legal, all clean. And weirdly, the calm that followed was almost eerie, because from the outside everything between us seemed fine, too fine. She was suddenly affectionate again, asking about my day, cracking old jokes, even talking about dinner plans. It threw me off balance. After months of distance, she was warm again, and that scared me more than anything. Part of me started to doubt myself. Maybe I'd misread it all. Maybe she really had just been stressed or distracted. Maybe I'd gone too far. But then, one Friday night, she turned off the TV, sat down beside me, and said, "We need to talk." I knew instantly what was coming. My chest went cold before she even said the words. "I think we should get a divorce," she said. Her tone wasn't angry or emotional. It was flat, rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. I just stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. She started talking about needing space, wanting to find herself, feeling like she'd lost her identity. It was every cliché you could imagine. But then she said something that hit different. "You know, I've made a lot of sacrifices for you. I don't think you really appreciate them. I deserve more." That line, "I deserve more," cut straight through me. It wasn't sadness or confusion anymore. It was entitlement, like everything we'd built together was some kind of debt I owed her. I sat there listening, my mind racing. Why now? Why this sudden conviction? Then she said it, the line that made everything click. "A friend of mine has been helping me see things more clearly." She didn't look at me when she said it, just stared at her hands like she was reading from a script. A friend. That word echoed in my head like a gunshot. It wasn't just advice she'd gotten over coffee. Someone had been in her ear, building her confidence, feeding her this narrative that she was the victim and I was the obstacle. And as she talked more about how she'd sacrificed and lost herself, All I could think was sacrifices? What sacrifices? I'd supported her through everything. When she wanted to move closer to her office, even though it doubled my commute, I said yes. When she wanted to quit her job and switch careers, twice, I backed her. When she asked to go on that expensive yoga retreat last year, I made it happen, even though it meant cancelling the trip I'd been saving for. I wasn't perfect, but I showed up. I listened. I remembered the little things I tried, so when she said she deserved more, I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling something colder, clarity. This wasn't about what I'd done, this was about what she thought she could get. The woman sitting across from me wasn't my wife anymore. She was someone else entirely, someone who had been planning this conversation for weeks, maybe months, and now she was just delivering her lines. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I just said quietly, "If that's how you feel, I guess we should figure out the next steps." She looked caught off guard, like she'd expected a fight. But I'd already stopped fighting long before that moment. She didn't know it yet, but the game she thought she was winning had already ended. A few days later, she moved out and into her own apartment. The following Monday, I got the divorce papers, and that's when I finally understood what her friend must have told her, because those papers weren't just about ending a marriage. They were about taking everything. She wanted half the house, half the savings, half the assets. She even wanted the car. And tucked in between the pages were vague clauses about spousal support that made no sense considering she made a higher salary than I did. She wasn't leaving me, she was trying to clean me out. At first, I told myself she was just being bitter, angry and lashing out after everything fell apart. But the way she worded her demands, sharp and detailed like she'd been coached, told me something else. Someone was behind her, feeding her strategy. I couldn't just ask her outright, so I had to get smart about it. I started where anyone would, social media. She hadn't blocked me, and though her posts were scarce, I combed through every tag, every comment, every like. That's when a name kept popping up. Jake. He wasn't over the top, just consistently present. You've got this here, a heart emoji there. It was subtle, but it made me pause. I clicked on his profile, public. At first glance, he was just another 30-something marketing guy, nothing that screamed homewrecker. But then I saw something that turned my stomach. A photo from the same cafe I'd seen her at weeks before, the same day I'd overheard her talking about starting fresh. I scrolled further. More little things. A comment that seemed too personal. A selfie from what looked suspiciously like her new apartment. None of it was smoking gun-proof, but it was enough to set my instincts on fire. I couldn't shake her words about a friend who helped her through things. I wanted to know who this friend really was, so I reached out to Lisa, one of her oldest friends. I kept it casual, asked if she'd talked to my wife lately, noticed anything strange. The shift in her tone was instant. Defensive, evasive. "I don't know anything," she said too quickly, cutting me off like she couldn't get off the phone fast enough. That alone told me everything. I didn't stop there. I called Emily, another friend. Same approach. Gentle, calm, like I was just trying to make sense of things. She was hesitant, dodging questions, giving half answers. Then she ended the call abruptly. I sat there feeling like I'd hit a wall, but a few minutes later my phone rang again. Emily. Her voice was low, nervous. She said she needed to be sure what she told me wouldn't come back to her. I promised it wouldn't. Then after a long silence, she finally said it. The name. Jake. She told me my wife had been spending a lot of time with him. They'd met at work. He wasn't just a colleague. He'd been giving her advice about the divorce, about what she deserved. The moment she said it, everything clicked. Jake wasn't just some supportive friend. He was the one guiding her, the one whispering in her ear while she dismantled my life piece by piece. I couldn't sleep that night. My thoughts spun in circles until I decided to see for myself. That Saturday, I drove to her apartment and parked a block away. I waited. Hours passed before the front door finally opened, and there they were, her and Jake. They didn't hold hands, but they didn't need to. The way they leaned in close, their bodies naturally aligning, told me everything. He opened the car door for her, she laughed softly, and they drove off. I didn't follow. I didn't have to. The truth had already followed me home. She hadn't just fallen out of love, she'd been replaced. Every cold text, every unreasonable demand, every calculated move suddenly made sense. She was building a new life, and I was just the obstacle in her way. But what she didn't know, what Jake didn't know, was that I had already been preparing too. When our first mediation session came around, the air was so thick with tension you could almost taste it. Her lawyer arrived with a mountain of documents like he was ready to sue a corporation. He read off her demands. Half the house, the accounts, the car, spousal support. She sat there with that faint, practiced look of victimhood, like she was about to walk away with everything. I said nothing. My lawyer simply waited until it was our turn. Then he slid a thick file across the table. "Before we proceed," he said calmly, "I think everyone should review these." Her lawyer started flipping through the papers, his face tightening with every page. "What is this?" he asked, his voice suddenly losing that confident edge. My lawyer replied, still even, "These documents show that all major assets were legally transferred into a trust under my client's mother's name several weeks before the divorce filing. The trust is irrevocable and fully compliant." The room went dead silent. Her lawyer turned to her, his confusion obvious. "You didn't mention this," he said. She snatched the papers, her face draining of color as she read the notarized signatures. "This can't be real," she whispered. Then she looked at me, not shocked anymore, but furious. "You planned this," she hissed, her voice low and trembling with rage. "You knew I was going to file, and you set this up to screw me over." I didn't answer her. I just sat there, calm, letting her piece everything together in silence. Her lawyer, clearly unsettled, asked mine to clarify. And he did, slowly, methodically, walking them through every notarized signature, every timestamp, every legal transfer that made it impossible to contest. The dates lined up perfectly, proving I'd moved my assets long before she ever filed. There was no loophole, no technicality to exploit. It was airtight. She sat there, furious, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're unbelievable," she hissed, leaning forward. "I can't believe you'd do this to me." But I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. This wasn't revenge, it was defense. She'd made it clear she was coming for blood, so I made sure she'd find nothing left to take. The meeting ended awkwardly, her lawyer muttering something about revisiting their approach. But everyone in the room knew the truth, their strategy was dead. As we left, she caught me in the hallway. Her voice was low, trembling with rage. "This isn't over," she said. "You're going to regret this." I finally looked her in the eye and said, "The only thing I regret is trusting you." After that, everything unraveled faster than I expected. Within hours, she spiraled. The calls started, first calm, even sweet. Voicemails about talking things out and not letting this destroy us. When I didn't respond, the tone flipped. The next day, her messages swung from sobbing apologies to venomous tirades. One moment, she was crying about mistakes and lost love. The next, screaming about how I'd ruined her life. I ignored everyone. My lawyer's advice was simple: don't engage. So I didn't, but she wasn't done. When she realized I wouldn't play, she turned to stories, ridiculous ones. Mutual friends began reaching out, confused, asking if it was true that the divorce was a prank. She'd actually told people the whole thing was some kind of social experiment, a test of our marriage. When that fell apart under even basic scrutiny, like the fact she'd hired a lawyer and filed official papers, she switched tactics again. Now she was the victim. She said I'd overreacted, betrayed her trust, and that she only wanted to see how strong we were. Some people bought it at first. I got sympathetic messages from acquaintances. Even her brother lashed out, saying I should have talked it out instead of being so cold. It was pathetic, but I knew the truth would find its way out. And it did. It came from someone unexpected. Matt. He wasn't a close friend, more of a mutual contact who'd always been decent to both of us. One afternoon, he texted me saying he had something I needed to see. When we met, he looked uneasy, like he was about to drop a bomb. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me a string of screenshots, messages between her and Jake. "How did you get these?" I asked. Matt explained that a mutual acquaintance of theirs had overheard Jake bragging about how he was helping her secure her future. That acquaintance got suspicious, dug deeper, and eventually took screenshots before passing them to Matt, who felt I deserved to know. "This guy's been playing both of you," Matt said. "He's been hyping her up to take you for everything, promising he'd be there for her after." I scrolled through the texts, each one more gutting than the last. In one, she'd written, "Once the settlement's done, we'll have everything we need. I just need him to agree to the terms." Jake replied, "Don't back down. Make him feel guilty if you have to. He owes you. We'll start fresh once you've got the money." My stomach turned. This wasn't heartbreak. This was a setup, cold, deliberate, and greedy. I thanked Matt quietly, but I barely heard myself. I just sat there, numb, realizing how deep the deception went. It wasn't just emotional manipulation. It was financial warfare disguised as heartbreak. Word spreads fast, though, especially when people love drama. Matt shared the screenshots with a few friends, and they made their rounds. Within days, her narrative collapsed. People who had once pitied her began ghosting her. Even her closest allies started backing away, quietly ashamed for ever taking her side. When the final divorce hearing came, she stood there with nothing left to bargain with. Her lawyer, defeated, quietly dropped her claims. Every wild demand, half the assets, the car, the support, disintegrated in the face of the trust documents. My preparation had left them with nothing to touch. Jake? He disappeared. No warning, no explanation. One moment he was the voice in her ear, the next he was gone, like he'd never existed. I guess when the gold dries up, the diggers move on. Her calls didn't stop, though, they just changed. No more anger, just pleading. Can we just talk, please? I'll do anything. Another one. You don't have to forgive me. Let's just settle this. I'll drop everything. But I never responded. There was nothing left to say. Even her family eventually saw the truth. Her brother called me one evening, guilt thick in his voice. I didn't know what she was doing, he said. I'm sorry for believing her. I told him not to worry. None of us had seen it coming. When everything finally settled, I had the house, my savings, and something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My mum came over with paint swatches and new curtains, helping me reclaim the space as mine again. The silence didn't feel empty anymore, it felt earned. She became just another closed chapter, one I no longer needed to reread. The rest of my story, it's mine now, and for the first time in a long while, that's enough.